Emily has arrived. Welcome, everyone. My name is David Gordon. I'm the director of the Virginia Project. This is our Virginia Election Integrity Audit Interim Summary Report. This is just an interim report. This is not our complete report. We got a lot of support from all of you and many people around the country to do some investigation here, and this is our obligation to report to you what we've done so far, what we found, and what we're going to do moving forward. I have with me our Director of Election Integrity. This is Ned Jones, and he has been working very hard on this for a number of months with us, and he's done a great job for us. I just want to open by saying a few words about election integrity in general and why it's important. The outcome of elections is no small thing. Elections are the means by which civic disputes are arbitrated. They're declarations of the will of the people. They grant representative legitimacy to governing institutions, and they're an important instrument with which to minimize violence and extremism. Elections serve to reduce the stress in society by allowing the expression of this popular will. If the outcome of elections is not the same as the popular will, then elections do not serve their purpose. Stress that's not released by the peaceful process of elections is then released in the form of civil disorder or other destructive stresses on society. The established standard for elections is that they must be free and fair. Illegality, or the appearance thereof, corruption, irregularity, or impropriety, all of these contradict the purpose of free and fair elections. Furthermore, elections must be verifiable. If losing candidates and their supporters cannot be reasonably convinced that the loss was genuine and reflected the will of the people, then nothing is resolved by having an election. Institutions which lack the legitimacy granted by popular will, as expressed through election outcomes, cannot function without the support, cooperation, and informed consent of the people. Only through being able to prove victory at the polls can a government claim a mandate and act authoritatively on behalf of the people. The 2000 election had a number of particularly extraordinary circumstances, as we're all aware. There was the public health crisis, the emergency shutdown orders that disrupted our convention process in total, delayed the primary date, and was disruptive in other ways to the normal political process. In addition, because of so much mail-in ballots, there was an extraordinary situation in terms of how the ballots were counted in the central absentee precincts, which was, it is where they are normally counted, but the number of votes, the percentage of the overall vote that was processed in central absentee precincts became a real problem, because those votes can't be verified in the same way that votes cast in person can be. All right, I'm going to open up the discussion and have Ned start review our findings for us. But before we start that, I'm going to note that we have a chat feature. We'll be monitoring the chat feature during the night. We understand that a lot of this material may be pretty dense, and you may have questions as we go along, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can going along. We've reserved a good amount of time for this, and we know that you will have questions. So pop your questions in the chat. We'll interrupt every so often to answer those questions, and there'll be a lot of material to cover. So plenty to keep us busy tonight. All right, let me give just some last remarks in terms of how I got involved in this. The Virginia Project has been operating since November 2019. We are a state IT and Party Building Logistics Political Action Committee. We did not intend to get into election integrity, but when the morning after Election Day came, it was obvious that there were many things that were very wrong that needed to be looked into. Having found nobody else taking the lead, I picked up the ball and I dedicated myself to investigating this for quite some time. During that process, I met Ned Jones. He was the most inquisitive and persistent of the people who helped out with the election integrity investigation, and he seemed like the best person to lead it. And I believe time has shown that he has indeed done an excellent job. So with that, I will turn over the floor to Ned to talk about some of our findings for our investigation. Take it
Well,
away.
thank you, David. And I'd like to welcome everybody this evening. I'm Ned Jones, the Election Integrity Director for the Virginia Project. And I want to start off by saying that election integrity is a core to our mission. And as David said, he started investigating election integrity on the morning of November 4th, 2020. We've noticed that many in the Republican Party, mostly what we would call establishment Republicans, have decided to move on from the November 2020 election. They're okay with the fact that the Republicans lost another election, insisting that the Democrats always cheat and that the outcome must be accepted. Or worse, insist that there was no fraud or illegal activity, or at least not enough to affect the outcome. Here at the Virginia Project, we believe Virginians, as David stated, have a right to fair and secure elections. And we are examining, research, and uncovering as best we can what happened last November. Then we will be suggesting strategies to prevent a repeat in 2021. We believe there are too many unanswered questions to be confident in the outcome of 2020. As David said, this is our interim report. We're going to discuss our ongoing work, a couple of completed findings, and our thoughts and recommendations for the future. There is still a significant amount of work to be completed for our final report, which we hope to release in June. One of the areas of our research is a mass mailing that was performed by an organization called the Center for Voter Information, also known as the Voter Participation Center, which is a nonprofit, left-leaning organization located in D.C. The Voter Participation Center mailed out over 2 million absentee ballot applications to voters in Virginia. They mailed out many millions more in at least 24 other states and certainly all the swing states. You may have heard about them in the press last fall. In Fairfax County, 500,000 of those absentee ballot applications had a return envelope to the wrong registrar's address. The Fairfax County applications were going to go back to Fairfax City, and many did. The Voter Participation Center claimed their direct mail house made a mistake and that they would correct it. However, we found that they made many similar mistakes in other states. Since there are no coincidences, we find it highly unlikely that these were in fact mistakes. It is plausible that this was intentional, designed to cause mass confusion because of the massive number of mail-in ballots in the election, and it allowed them to even flood more ballots into the states where they made the so-called mistake. Now, the Voter Participation Center had a very interesting arrangement with the post office. And on their mailing piece, they had a return address that looked just like a regular office suite. It had a street, it had a suite number, but actually it was a mailbox at a UPS store. The one in Richmond was on Carey Street. We found the same situation in at least 10 states where they were using a UPS store mailbox as their, quote, location. The arrangement they had with the post office didn't require them to have a physical location because any of their undeliverable mail pieces were not actually returned to them, but the post office provided a list of undeliverable mail and the reasons why it couldn't be delivered. We refer to this list as a list of unlikely voters. Those who are still registered to vote in Virginia, but they've either moved, died, listed under a maiden name, and so on. We are investigating the possibility that someone may have voted for these voters. There's a very interesting article published by the Capital Research Center about the activities of the Center for Voter Information in Virginia. You can find the article on their website, and it will be linked in on our written report. They also maintain a website called Influence Watch that has a tremendous amount of information about the Center for Voter Information, and I suggest that you read it. Our investigation of this group is ongoing. Another area we're looking at is our absentee ballot applications, and we have a file. We have a file called the Daily Absentee Ballot Application File. And this file lists every application for an absentee ballot and early voting on the date that it was filed and its disposition. So far, we have found that many Virginia voters did file more than one absentee application. Many had 5 or 6, a couple 7 and 8, and the record is 11. There were many voters that had as many as 11 applications for absentee ballots. And we're wondering why a voter would need to make so many applications. Over 400,000 applications were either canceled or deleted. Now, a reason for that may be a voter sent in their application and decided to vote in person, and that certainly could have happened. However, the other possibility is that someone other than the voter was submitting these multiple applications. And excuse me, and we're determined to find out by canvassing actual voters on our list whether or not they were the ones that filed the multiple applications. And our investigation of the daily absentee ballot application file is ongoing. Another thing that many of you may have heard about is the National Change of Address file known as the NCOA. And in one district here, one of our House of Delegate districts here in Virginia, we've matched up the NCOA with the voter rolls as they existed this year. And we found some very interesting things. Everyone talks about the shape of the voter rolls, and certainly they need to be cleaned up, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. But we found approximately 8% of the voters in that district had moved, and yet they were still registered to vote at their old address. So think about it. We have about 6 million voters in Virginia. If 8% of them were on this NCOA list and they hadn't been cleaned out of our voter rolls, think about what that number is. Even if it's half, it's still a significant number. And the issue is not with the voters who have moved and forgot to update their registration, but it's the fact that these registrations are susceptible to manipulation by bad actors. We would love to get the NCOA file for the entire state and do that comparison. However, the cost is prohibitive, and we just don't have the resources right now to do that. But we are going to canvass voters from our one district who have moved, who requested an absentee ballot, and ultimately voted in the Virginia election. The question is going to be, did they vote, or did someone else vote using their old Virginia registration? Just remember one thing, in the mass mailing that I talked about previously, all of these would have been returned to the post office box at the UPS store in Richmond. And our investigation of the NCOA is ongoing. A subject that we're all talking about, everyone I talk to around the state talks about voter rolls maintenance. We've already talked about it tonight, and the lack of it is a serious problem in Virginia. List maintenance, which is the removal of specific categories of voters, is required by law to be performed at least 90 days prior to a federal election. It was not done in 2020. The Department of Elections, in their annual report, which is called the Annual List Maintenance Report, which is available on our website, virginiaproject.com, said the maintenance was not performed in 2020 due to what else? COVID. But they would try to do it in December after the election. We're still working to find out if it has been performed. And we're supposed to get a new, cleaned up voter rolls list with the history of who voted in November this month. We haven't seen it yet, although I have heard rumors that it is available around the state. Another area that came up last year and we looked into is called the testing of our voter machines for logic and accuracy. The 2020 election was ripe with theories about the possible manipulation of voting machines. We've spent time confirming the testing of machines in Virginia, called the logic and accuracy testing, and there is a deadline before every election for this testing to be done in all of our electoral districts. Last year, many of the 133 electoral districts did the testing on time. However, 28 locations were late and 10 never tested their machines. So voters in those districts were using machines that were never tested. What we need in Virginia is a complete forensic audit of the November election, just like the forensic audit scheduled to happen in Fulton County, Georgia, and Maricopa County, Arizona. It's the most effective way to either prove or disprove the many theories about voting machines. However, a forensic audit is expensive, and there would inevitably be massive legal action to stop one, just as has occurred in Georgia and Arizona. State officials do not want an audit that will expose the irregularities or worse in their election systems. Our analysis of the machine LNA testing, as it's called, is a completed task. We're also reviewing a report called the Legislative Review Commission that is a bipartisan commission set up in 2018 to do a deep analysis into the election systems in Virginia. The report, which was published on September 10th of 2018, has 22 recommendations for improvements to our election system. Many of the recommendations focused on the kind of, we'll call them irregularities, that we are investigating in the November 2020 election. The number one recommendation was to make improvements in the process to update the voter rolls. We're trying to determine what, if any, of these recommendations were implemented in the 2 years before the November 2020 election. In other words, the state was well aware 2 years ago of the areas that needed attention, and it appears that not much was done. Certainly, the number one recommendation of updating the voter rolls was not implemented. In our review of this report, this commission report is ongoing. Something we've all heard about, and it's really in the news now, is what we call dark money. The Zuckerbergs and the Center for Tech and Civic Life, and how the funds were used in Virginia. Zuckerberg, who owns Facebook, and his wife gave $400 million to a small progressive nonprofit in Chicago called the Center for Tech and Civic Life. Virginia received nearly $4 million of this money in the form of grants to 39 cities and counties. CTCL, as we'll call them, formed a relationship with Virginia's registrars by offering them free training in March of 2020, and then following up and offering them these grants later in the year. They called these grants the COVID relief grants, and they were to be used for mail-in voting costs, drop boxes, PPE, additional staffing, satellite voting locations, and so on. The requests were submitted and the grants were distributed. Of the 39 locations that received grants, 14 of them were won by Biden, and those locations received $3.6 million. That was the majority of the funds, 90%, targeted to heavy Democrat areas. Trump won the other 25 locations, and they received a total of $420,000. Fairfax County received the largest grant, $1.4 million, and the vote for Biden was 18.5% more than Clinton got in 2016. Prince William County was next at $631,000. Biden's vote was 72% more than Clinton. This corporate money had an enormous impact on our election, and the subject is starting to get tremendous amount of coverage in the news. Once again, the Capital Research Center has published several articles about these grants, and we were involved in one of the articles that talks about the tremendous impact the grants had in Virginia. This article is available on the Capital Research Center website and also on our website, virginiaproject.com. The Armstead Project, which you may have heard about, and the Public Interest Legal Foundation are also investigating and reporting on these grants. The question is, do the Zuckerbergs, a private family, donation to a third party, which distributes the funds to local governments in heavy Democrat areas, violate any campaign laws? That's the question to be resolved. And our review and analysis of the dark money, as far as we can go, is completed. Another area that we're looking at are personal affidavits. Voter ID laws have changed dramatically in Virginia. Thanks to our Democratic legislature and governor, you no longer need a photo ID to vote. As a matter of fact, you don't need any ID to vote at all. All you need is the utility bill with your registration address. And if you don't have that, you can still vote by filling out an ID confirmation form, printing your name and signing it. The form even says, the only required information is the printed name and signature. The voter is signing this form subject to a felony charge if they are lying. And our investigation is to find out how many of these were signed, where are they being kept, how many felony investigations have there been, and how many convictions. And this is one of our ongoing investigations. A couple of things that we think should be done in the future, and one of them immediately. And that is to strengthen the close relationships that we already have between our local registrars and our local GOP committee units. The main benefit is to be sure that the voter rolls are maintained according to state law. We believe we have the structure to work with the local registrars to make this happen. And if it isn't done, there are legal remedies to make sure that it gets done. Other key issues to work with the registers on are election officials in all precincts and other matters that they handle. We call this new rules for the future. The legislature passed several new laws that have significantly changed our system just this year. And we will all have to play by the hand we're being dealt starting with the November 2021 election. There is no longer a single election day in Virginia, but we have a 45-day election with absentee, mail-in, and early voting starting on September 18th. The Democrats could always depend on Republicans voting on Election Day. Now that we have a 45-day election, Republicans should consider voting as early as possible by whatever means they are most comfortable with, absentee, mail-in, or early in person. If we vote early, the Democrats will be unable to watch our turnout on Election Day in order to figure out how many votes they need in the late reporting northern counties to win. Having a fair election starts with every eyes on every absentee ballot application and every ballot every day in every location. The new law calls for at least one absentee ballot central precinct in every one of the locations. So in order to have 100% coverage, we need an army of trained volunteers to be observers, election officials, and poll watchers. We need them to be well trained. We will also need a significant statewide legal team that is available for the full 45 days to handle any legal matters that come up at any of the voting locations. We cannot have the same unresolved legal situations we experienced last November. If you are a lawyer, please volunteer your time to these critical efforts. Our eyes are opened to the lengths to which Democrats will go to subvert the election process and seize power. Let us use the knowledge that we're gathering to prepare now and make a repeat of the 2020 election impossible. Thank you very much. And we will take your questions.
There was a question in the chat about the Center for Voter Integrity and who is behind it. Can you tell us what we've learned about that?
Yes, the Center for Voter Information has a web of funding. And if you go to the Influence Watch website and check them out, it's all listed. But what you have to do is you have to go beyond the list. You really have to follow the money, to coin a phrase, because it all leads back to the usual suspects, Soros, Steyer, Zuckerberg, and they've created a web of financing where one nonprofit will give to the next. So it's a very interesting process Very intricate, but it's very well done on that website, and I urge you to check it out.
Okay, this question from Thomas about Citizens United. Um, does it allow the dark money to flow unchecked? I suppose, but Virginia also has extremely loose campaign finance rules. You can accept unlimited donations. You can accept corporate donations. A lot of stuff can be, kind of shell company uh, laundered, and the financing system, yeah, it's very, very loose. So it creates lots of opportunities for dark money.
The Zuckerberg money ended up everywhere, and I think the issue there is whether or not a private citizen like that can, pass money through a third party that ends up with election officials in heavy Democrat areas. It's not equitable at all, and I think that's one of the key issues.
All right, Doug Barringer has some questions here. His first question is about the FOIA. Is it required or needed with uncooperative registrars? There are investigations happening as we speak that are requiring FOIAs. There's one situation in Charlottesville that's looking particularly promising because we may get our first actual access to physical ballots, or some facsimile thereof, which is something that's very, very difficult to get your hands on. So if we can get our hands on that, that would be wonderful. So FOIA is a tool for extracting information. You hope you don't have to do it. It's not that big a deal if you do. It only becomes a big deal if they don't answer it, if they stall it, if they refuse information that you have the right to. It's one of many tools. Legal action is another tool. That's the one that it gets very expensive very quickly. So we have to be extremely judicious with how we approach that part of it.
I can add to that one thing, David, because I dealt with about 20 of the registrars. I did a FOIA request for the Zuckerberg grants. Each location that got a grant had to fill out a form and tell us what they used the money for. But the Capital Research Center in their article had found many of the grants through their resources, and then I went ahead and did FOIAs for all the rest that we didn't have. The registrars are very receptive to that kind of a request where it was for a very specific kind of unimportant piece of information. But I've heard about, like David expresses, it really depends on what you're asking for and the reaction that you get. Mine was very positive so far, but when we start asking some of the other questions, I know it'll be a different situation.
Okay, let me see here. Okay, Doug's got an additional question about auditing voting machines, investigating Wi-Fi net connections. All right, let's discuss the machine situation because we know a lot of people have concerns about it. Virginia has a very, very different situation than most other states do. A lot of the discussion that you were seeing regarding other state systems does not apply to Virginia. Virginia's set of problems is pretty extreme, but they're different problems than what you see going on elsewhere in the country when it concerns the machines itself. We have on our audit page a spreadsheet of which counties have which machines. Virginia is a patchwork of different machines. In particular, people want to know about Dominion. It turns out that Dominion's presence in Virginia is really not that extensive. They're like number 3 out of 4 companies that have a presence in Virginia. Virginia also has slightly different procedures, including air gapping that would seem to head off some of the machine-based manipulation that we are, concerned with in other states. However, machines only perform as well as their operation, so they need to be operated according to policy, according to procedure. And unfortunately, the lack of observers has also presented us with the problem of verifying that these procedures were followed in many places, including many of the places that we're most concerned with because they're heavy Democrat areas, churning out suspicious number of Democrat votes. And unfortunately, we can't go back in history and insert observers where they weren't. And I know people don't like the answer that, okay, well, next time we won't, let it happen. But the reality is that that's primarily what we can do. We can clamp down on all these various avenues for malfeasance, potential fraud, and so on. And we're working on it. We're working very hard on it, and we're not the only ones working on it. Election integrity groups have been proliferating across the state. RPV has an election integrity working group that's been active for a while. Fairfax just started a new group. I know some of the district committees have started their groups. Some of the county committees have started their groups. So people are mobilizing. Now, the role the Virginia project can play in this is where there are gaps in what people are doing locally, we can go and address those specific areas. And again, they'll tend to be very strong Democrat areas, high population, where the potential for fraud is greatest. Okay, lots and lots of questions. Is anyone investigating the ballot dump in Fairfax County? Ned, you want to talk about the ballot dump in Fairfax?
Yeah, what happened was, and we're back to reporting now. There was a spike in Virginia. Everybody's seen it. The counting stopped around 11 o'clock, I believe, but the reporting continued. So there's a lot of concern about a spike in vote count that happened in 2 a.m. or in the middle of the night. That's been explained a couple of different ways. One was a clerical error that was immediately corrected, and you can see negative votes in that report. But the other one is a tremendous dump from Fairfax County from their absentee precincts, which created a huge impact on the vote count, specifically for Biden. None of which has ever been proved to my satisfaction, but those are the two things that you hear about. Again, I believe a forensic audit would tell the tale, but it's probably not going to happen.
Okay, moving on, some additional questions. Jessica wants to know if we've sought pro bono counsel. Yes, we've recruited a number of lawyers, a number of additional lawyers and people with other legal skills have volunteered. So we're building the stable of election rights enforcement assets, I guess we can call them. We need more. If you got more lawyers, send them our way. The better the rates they'll give, the better off we'll be, because raising political money is not quite so easy, especially for a grassroots group like us. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Someone on an iPhone says that the state party doesn't seem to care. How can we pressure Republicans to investigate? Okay, the state party could be better at messaging, but they do care, believe you me. And if you missed it, Chris Marston, the RPV General Counsel, put out a very significant and detailed report, specifically in response to the risk limiting audit, but it contained a lot of information about what is not really right about the mechanics of how the system works, all the quality assurance problems and verification problems that we're having. Bottom line is the RPV is concerned, not just at the state level, but also at the congressional district and the county level. This is kind of new, that it wasn't taken seriously in the past, but everybody's concentrated minds on the situation because it's obvious that we're not getting a fair deal, and we have the right to it. So we're going to demand it, and RPV is totally on board. So don't think that the RPV isn't involved or doesn't care. They do. The biggest problem with the RPV right now is they're not messaging it. They're not communicating that to you. And I keep trying to encourage them to communicate a little better, but they're on it. And we are working with them hand in hand. Okay, what else? What else do we have? Why do the northern counties count last? Ed, you want to address that one? Partially it's because they're the highest population, but obviously everybody on our side suspects that they're just waiting to see how many votes they need to manufacture. Clearly, the entire situation stinks. I personally have proposed that Republican counties embargo all election results until after the big Democrat counties have reported. It seems only fair that Republicans get to report last sometimes too. Otherwise, it looks like we're getting scammed, and we shouldn't have to put up with this. Okay, what else we got here? All right, so okay, so the absentee ballot scheme, I just want to review it for a second. What we think is happening is that there's this big pool of potentially fraudulent votes because the voter rolls are so bad. We did the look into a full House of Delegates district. We found 15% failed the national change of address check. There's clear evidence that the Democrats support the illegal state of the voter rolls. Mayor of Alexandria embarrassingly said that having 10,000 more voters on the rolls than could legally be registered was just fine with him. They didn't have any problem with that at all. So the voter roll oversubscription creates a vast pool, and we're talking sizes over 600,000. 600,000 is like a minimum estimate, but there's a vast pool of basically bad voters on the rolls. So the question is, how do you exploit these bad voters on the rolls on a mass scale? And that's where that Center for Voter Information comes in. The mailing that they put out was on a mass scale. The arrangement that they had with the Postal Service did give them the ability to harvest these very, we're calling them most unlikely voters. There's a random chance that they would actually pull somebody who would vote, but it's an extremely small chance, and there just wouldn't be enough of it to really have a scheme detected. So the records that we need to determine to what extent that's been happening are kind of being stalled. We should have received these records quite some time ago, and we are still waiting. So from our perspective, it looks like they're hiding something, and they really need to be a lot more upfront about what data they're going to produce and when it's going to be produced. The lack of cleaning of the voter rolls, state law was violated. This black and white law that says 90 days before a federal election, you got to clean those voter rolls. And the guidance wasn't given. The registrars didn't do it on their own. So the state of these voter rolls is horrendous, and they offer the potential for fraud in very, very large numbers. Bringing down the size of that potentially fraudulent voter pool is probably going to be the number one thing that we need to do, because it reduces the potential for manipulating elections. It reduces the amount of manipulation that can be done. So take the voter rolls problem very seriously, because it's absolutely critical to what's going on in Virginia. Okay. Thomas, the establishment GOP is not controlled opposition. They need to get their act together. They got lazy, but they're not controlled opposition. There are folks. Okay, let's see here. Carol, yes, they're all using the same Smartmatic code, but again, we have a little bit different procedures in Virginia. So Are voting machines part of the problem in Virginia? Maybe, but we don't have enough data to make that call one way or another. And there are screaming huge problems, like with the voter rolls, central absentee processing, the absentee ballot rolls. There are much more glaring problems in Virginia in particular that are screaming for our attention. And once we clear those off the plate, then maybe what's left over, the machines may play a significant part in it. But we just don't have the data. Getting access to the machines is pretty near impossible. We've looked for source code, we can't get it. We want physical access to the machines to inspect them, we can't get it. We can't get the ballots, except in the one case in Charlottesville that we're looking at that looks like it has some promise. The machines themselves are also a problem because of the logic and accuracy issue. When I was doing my initial investigation, I went through the procedures and the logic and accuracy thing came up. It was initially assumed that this was a pro forma type of procedure, that it was always done properly, it was so common that there was no need to look. So we sent out some FOIAs. We found out that there's something like a 20% miss rate in certifying the machines according to law. So these were additional violations of law. And some entire counties, including all of Prince William, voted on machines that were not certified for logic and accuracy. So you can see why the whole free and fair thing isn't squaring up against the reality of what we see on the ground. All right, let's run through some more questions here. Any chance a forensic audit would change? I'm not sure. Thomas, another state. I don't understand your question, Thomas. If you can rephrase, that would be great. Okay, Lillian wants to know, are there instances where there are more votes than registered voters? I don't believe so, but the padding, there's like a 15% padding on the voter roll. So there's a lot of room for them to work with in submitting false votes. Okay, Jessica, if you want to hook us up with lawyers, bring them on. We'll put them all to use. Every last one of them. We need to cover the state. Okay, so the deal with lawyers and the elections. You need to be prepared on the spot to challenge something when there's an irregularity during an election. If you challenge it afterwards, you've lost. The law does not support you, even if you're totally right on the facts. You need to be there at the time, ready to challenge every irregularity and illegality when it happens. And the lack of preparation there is really what allowed the Democrats to get away with some really stinky stuff this year. We wanted challenges in the 4th and in the 7th, but because they came after the fact rather than during, our side's hands were legally tied. The law didn't allow us the redress that we were seeking. So,
hey, David, can I just add something to that?
Absolutely.
I just want to tell everybody about an experience I just had with a gentleman from Fairfax County. He was a poll watcher all day at one of the precincts, and the experience he had is exactly what David's talking about. He was outside, saw a box truck pull up, gentleman in a suit got out, took a dolly out of the back, took out a crate, walked right by the gentleman. The crate was full of absentee ballot envelopes, and the guy went to the front door of a locked school, took out a key, let himself in, and that crate disappeared. When he came out, he just had the dolly. Now that's when we need a lawyer. We need to train our people that when something like that happens, we get a lawyer and find out exactly what we have to do, because that's the kind of stuff that's going on. As it turned out, Trump won that precinct, the first Republican, I think he said, to almost ever have won. The gentleman who was running the precinct was in such a hurry to leave, he did not make the so-called phone call of results. He just packed up, didn't confirm the count of voters with the count on the machine, all the things the horror stories that we hear about, that's when we need the lawyer. After the next day, it's too late. I personally could have used a lawyer a couple of times if I had known it as a poll watcher in a Democrat district in Richmond.
Okay, let me see. We got a question from Andy Bayer. Why have we not sued the electoral board for dereliction of duty and cleaning the rolls? Well, they broke the law, but unfortunately, there's no relief available under the law. That's kind of a catch-22. They can break the law, but there's no way you can hold them to account. So,
And COVID is the excuse. COVID is the excuse for everything.
Um, we are pursuing the cleaning of the rolls. We don't know what the state is. It's been promised that the rolls would be cleaned. We are still waiting on them. Yeah, we're getting tired of excuses on that because, again, it looks like we're being stalled. It looks like there's a lot of bad faith in what's going on, and we got to press this all the way through to flush that out and get the deal. James wants to know where the voter roll problems are. They're almost everywhere, and so most of the worst problems are in the big, high population Democrat districts. There's a analysis done by Judicial Watch shows that some like 20 counties in Virginia have over 100%, and it goes up to 115%. And I believe the situation's only gotten worse with the lack of voter roll cleaning since. And all the shenanigans that they pulled this year. There's some weirdness at the DMV where they're signing up people who aren't eligible. There was a consent decree with for no witness signature that was later ruled illegal. There are voter roll problems everywhere. It is the number one thing that Republicans must confront, and we're going to have to come back to it again and again and again until we fix this problem. Okay, what else we got here? All right, John wants to know what kind of money we would be talking about for forensic audit. I believe the figure is somewhere in the single-digit millions. It is very significant, and I doubt that will even be allowed to because the Democrats will stop it in any way they can, and unfortunately, the law doesn't really support us too much. The law seems unfortunately oriented towards clamping down on frivolous challenges, and because it has rules to prevent frivolous challenges, they seem a bit overbroad, and they're preventing substantial challenges along with for frivolous ones. So that's again part of the overall problem. Okay. Sarah wants to know if there's possibility of local newspapers shining a light over and over. Well, the local newspapers are another part of our election integrity problem. Local newspapers are by and large all but propaganda organs for the Democrat Party. You can see, for example, the situation in Loudoun is national news, but I think only one local paper has reported on it. Don't depend on the local papers because they don't want to get involved. Not on our side. They'll help the Democrats. I really think that these local papers, a lot of them are basically political action committees acting in defiance of the law and pretending to be newspapers when they're not. They're really activist organs for a partisan cause. Okay. All right. It seems that we've covered a lot of the material. There's much more in terms of the details that we found. We could go over the uniformity requirement and these drop boxes. The drop boxes are a pretty extreme problem, not just because of the lack of chain of custody brings the authenticity of the ballots into question. And they also seem to provide a very ready mechanism for mass exploitation of the oversubscription on the voter rolls. However, they also present a uniformity problem. It's not just that elections need to be free and fair, but they also need to be uniform. It needs to be administered in the same way throughout the entire state. And the drop boxes and the Zuckerberg grants both destroyed the uniformity of elections in Virginia. So that's an issue that may potentially have to be litigated. Jen, yeah, we need a lot of lawyers. Basically, we need to bury these people in lawyers because it's the only way anything's going to happen. We're certainly not going to depend on a Democrat-controlled government to do the right thing when it inures to the benefit of Republicans. Okay, let's see what else we got. Can we wear a camera when volunteering at a poll? I'm not sure about that. We're going to have to consult legal on that. I certainly do want to put up a lot of cameras where possible, where it's legal, to monitor the situations, not just at the polls, but also at these drop boxes. I think we need to set up a camera for every one of those drop boxes if it's legally possible, and find out how ballots are getting in those. What is their usage pattern, and is anybody dropping a whole stack of ballots in there? Because we kind of think they are. All right, what else we got here? Can the GOP ever take back Virginia? Oh, you bet.
Absolutely.
You bet. And
Yeah.
watch what we do this year. We're doing it right this year. We're putting candidates up for every one of those House of Delegates seats. We're going to fight for every last one of them. Democrats aren't going to get to play this in easy mode anymore. We're building up the state party units all across the state. We have issues aplenty. I mean, we've got a full suite of issues. Plus, we've already lost almost everything we can lose. We're defending 4 House of Delegate seats. Everything else we play offense. So the Democrats are not good at playing defense. They're not good at explaining their crazy stuff. So they're going to have a real hard time this year. And, the fact that we're going to be dropping lawsuits all over Loudoun County isn't going to go well for them either. Okay, what else we got here? Project Veritas. I don't know anything about that. Ned, do you know anything about?
What was that one? Project Veritas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've actually written to them several times, explaining some of the things we're doing in hopes that they pick up the situation here in Virginia. They would be the perfect asset to do their investigative work on some of these organizations. Nothing's happening now, and we'll see.
Okay. John wants to know where the final report is going and who is receiving it. When we do the final report, we're probably looking at end of June or July. We haven't hard scheduled it yet. We're going to send it to all the units. We're going to promote the hell out of it, and we'll be putting
We'll have one of these.
Sorry?
We'll have another webinar.
And we'll have another one of these to present their findings and discuss your questions. So a few more months and we'll wrap up our investigation, at least as far as we practically can for this year, because we need to look forward to taking the results of this investigation and then acting on them. And acting on them means getting the info out to the units, training people in election integrity, recruiting volunteers madly, getting our people to work in the election systems jobs. That's something that gets overlooked, but we need our people in there because the Democrats have inserted their activists into the actual administration of the election. Yeah, we're going to release all that in a few months. We're going to drop everything we got. We'll have recommendations for what to do. We'll be setting up the business processes here at Virginia Project to support all these election integrity activities. So it's a multi-spectrum problem with a multi-spectrum solution. Okay, why can't military help in elections? I really don't know about that, but I believe there's, active military is prohibited from actively participating in elections. Other than that, they can participate as voters, and there is an issue with them participating as convention delegates, but I don't want to get into that here because it's off topic. Okay, what a ballot counting done at the individual election site. Okay, so that's the central absentee precinct problem that we're dealing with. In a normal year, a very small percentage of ballots are counted in central absentee precincts. However, this year, due to the public health scare, we had 60% of Virginia's ballots were counted in central absentee precincts. This presents a huge analysis problem. And the reason why it does is because those votes that are counted in the central absentees were not allocated towards the individual precincts, the individual voter precincts. Now, we're using the word precinct in a little two separate contexts here, so let me quickly explain. You have a normal voting precinct, that's where you show up physically to go vote on a normal basis. The central absentee precincts is everything in a single county or city that is submitted via absentee or early vote, and they were heavily encouraging early vote as well. So the result is that the breakdown of the vote that we have at the voter precinct is only like 40% of the vote. We can't compare that number to previous years. At the voter precinct, it looked like a massive Trump landslide, but what went on in the central absentee precincts reversed all that and created the Democrat wins. So the fact that we can't really get the details of what went on in the central absentee precincts is a huge problem, and that transparency is a major issue right now.
And now it's mandated that every single voting location will have one of those precincts.
Somebody's asking if there are lawsuits in Chesterfield. I'm not aware of one.
I haven't heard of any.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Carol mentioned that District 2 doesn't have a GOP candidate. We may actually have a candidate, just not announced. We're going to have one for District 2. What can we do to help the Virginia Project if you're not a lawyer? Number one, get on our mailing list. We do send out quite a bit of stuff, but we're not wasting your time. Everything that we do send is packed with information you need to know serious about Republican politics in Virginia. Number two, sign up for as a volunteer. Get in our system. We have hundreds of volunteers. We're going to collect as many as we can. What we do with the volunteers is we have use for them in our own programs, and also they will be used by party units. They will be used by candidates, and they will be used by third-party groups like other political action committees, and the volunteers may also be useful to help individuals in particular cases. Okay, what else we got? We're not involved in the GOP convention. It's privately run. So what we're discussing here has to do with actual balloting at elections, not conventions. I would direct all questions about that about the conventions to the candidates or to the party units themselves. Okay. Any Doug wants to know if anything prevents us from monitoring absentee precincts. Well, what has prevented us is focus and election observers, and we're doing, we are definitely focused on it now, and we're recruiting tons of election observers. Okay. All right. If anybody else has questions, pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we're about an hour into this, and if nobody has any other current questions, then we can wrap up for tonight. Keep in mind that what we've discussed tonight is actually just a small portion of what we found overall. We've been trying to focus on the big things, but there's tons of irregularities all over the place. We have we have known violations of law. We have voter rolls problem. We have problems with absentee processing and late reporting, improper influence, recording irregularities overnight with the shutdown. We have changes in election law. We have our failed challenge investigations. We reviewed the election equipment. We went through the uniformity requirement. And we are still ongoing with additional items that we're not ready to report on yet. Okay. Karen wants to know: do we have access to Social Security death database by proxy? We do. We can validate lists off of it. It costs us a little bit of money, but if the list we got isn't too big, it shouldn't be too onerous. Where will the recording of this event be made available? We're going to post it on our site, and I started a YouTube account, and we're going to start post some stuff there. If somebody's good at video editing, that's a talent we kind of need on staff right now. We're relying on our IT guy, but we have him pretty busy with setting up all sorts of campaigns and units, and any additional multimedia talent is welcome. It's a weakness we have right now. Okay. Do we know if the machines are connected to the internet? Reports I've seen insist they are. Ned, can you clarify what the situation is there?
Well, we're starting to hear that they definitely have the capability of going on the internet. However, the official story has always been that they do not and are not. None of the reporting is done over the internet. It's all done, I was told, by phone. But my gut tells me, and I don't have the answer yet, that there definitely is some involvement with the internet. Poll observers have told me they've seen cables. There's a couple of districts now where they're talking about modems in the motherboard. So it's very possible that the machines that we're told don't communicate with the internet do. That's just something that I personally haven't gotten the proof for yet, and it is definitely something that a lot of people in Virginia are looking at.
Okay. Let's see. What else we got? Okay. Jen wants to know, the fraud and corruption is so widespread. How can we be everywhere and report and investigate things as they happen? Okay. So the answer is that we need to industrialize it. We need to leverage our IT capabilities in order to create a business process that we can mass process irregularity reports, investigate them, put people on site at the time that they need to be challenging things. So this is a business operation that needs to be put together. It's not going to happen by itself. It's not going to happen effectively ad hoc. This needs to be a normal, every year operation where we have a formal process for rapid reacting with lawyers to any reports of irregularity that may infringe upon our rights at the ballot box. Okay.
The big difference now is the awareness. There's thousands of people around Virginia aware now. I talk to them all the time. It's the awareness is going to help us tremendously. Our eyes are open. You know, the phrase "you're asleep at the switch." Well, maybe that was last November, but that's not going to happen again. But we do need to recruit that army of volunteers. That's going to be the key.
Okay, somebody mentioned the DS200. Yes, we know all about the DS200. The DS200 has a security verification bug in it. It is a counting machine widely used in Virginia. This is where the policies and procedures come in. Anybody who was aware of that security verification issue could manipulate the outcome of those machines however they pleased, and the machines would let them. When you don't have observers on site, when you don't have the ability to challenge already lined up, then they get away with it. So we got to stop them. Okay, what else we got? Yeah, Jen, we are doing all that. I'm an enterprise IT engineer. I did this for large companies for decades. You know, RPV needs an IT back end that it doesn't have. Any enterprise the size of the Republican Party of Virginia and its constituents, almost every other enterprise already has some sort of enterprise IT support. RPV didn't, and creating that and bringing it into existence is a large part of the reason for Virginia Project's existence. So yes, we're going to set up all the business processes. I mean, I automated business processes for decades for large companies where lots of money was on the line. You know, this is at least as important as any amount of money, and we're going to automate the business processes for effectively enforcing the rights of Republicans and others at the ballot box in Virginia. Okay, let's see here. Is RPV's election integrity working group still meeting? Yes, Chris Marston is running that at RPV. I don't remember his RPV email offhand. Might be general counsel at rpv.org. Someone have to look at that up. Yeah, Chris Marston is leading that, and also locally there are local working groups for election integrity, which would be the first place you should look, because bottlenecking everything at the state level is just going to create process problems. Okay. Okay, somebody asked which elected officials, delegates and senators were dedicated to election reform in Virginia. Okay, first thing, we don't take sides in any sort of primaries. Let me get that out straight. So we're not going to advocate for one candidate over another. We'll support whoever the GOP nominees are. That said, that there are two people who have helped us more than any other in terms of elected officials. Those were Delegate Dave LaRocque and Senator Amanda Chase. Both of them were extremely useful to our investigations, especially connecting us to all the people who are subject matter experts, and also connecting us to IT support and others who really knew what was going on. So my hat's off to them. They took some risk in working with us, and they did, very well for us. They really set us on the right path, and we discovered a lot due to the leads that each was able to provide to us. Okay. Do we need IT volunteers to set up a program to challenge process on election day? We're not going to do that one with volunteers. We're going to pay. We have a good developer now on staff, and we're going to pay for it. And the reason why we're going to avoid volunteers is that for this particular purpose is that it just got to get done. And sometimes with volunteers, they don't really come through. And if you're not paying them, you can't really lean on them too much because everything's at will. Everything's what people want. That's one of the drawbacks dealing with volunteers. So we do pay people where we have to. We usually get very good rates because everybody we work with loves, the mission and is all for it. So we can negotiate some very, very good rates. But we are building that, and we are paying to have it built because it needs to happen. It's not a nice to have. it's a must-have. Right. What happened to Sidney Powell? I spoke to her team a couple of times. They didn't want to get into the weeds of the Virginia problem because it was too complex. They were dealing with national level issues, and Virginia, as you've learned tonight, has so many different factors that need to be addressed in order to straighten the system out that it just wasn't appropriate for the short-term emergency suits that they were working on. So we did speak to them briefly, but we didn't have that synergy. It wasn't a good match. Okay, who else we got here? Election integrity groups in Williamsburg. I do not know. If you're looking for an election integrity group, please go to our index of county units. Start any questions you have about the Republican Party. Always start with the county units. Get involved in your county unit. Make it stronger. Be there to lend your experience, intelligence, whatever else you got to the effort. If you don't show up, they don't know that you're there, and you can't help what the team is doing. So join your unit committees, and that should be your reflexive first point of contact for any questions about what's going on in the party. That's what they exist to do. Okay, is there hope for Fairfax County? You bet. You bet. Fairfax County is it's a big problem, but the Democrats have screwed up so badly with what they've done in the schools in particular. It's going to be a massive liability. They're going to have a tough time holding on to much of what they got in the face of the backlash in the school system. Any ideas how many unit leaders have been involved and how many are involved tonight? Unfortunately, we're scheduled concurrently with the governor debate, so probably a lot of the unit leaders are going to be dealing with the governor debate. I think I recognize a couple of county chairmen in the list here, but again, contact your people locally and find out what they're doing. If they need help, have them contact us, and we'll do our best to get them rolling. All right, that looks like it's wrapping up our questions for tonight. Well, that's our report. We hope you believe that you got what you had donated for or spent your time to help us with. And if we will continue our program. Ned is our Director of Election Integrity, and he is your go-to point for all things election integrity for the Virginia project.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much for coming this evening.
I got one last question. If funding can be made available, is RPV interested in having a forensic audit? I believe they would be if somebody actually came up with the millions of dollars to do that. However, if somebody was going to drop millions of dollars for the Republican Party in Virginia, we got much better uses for it. The forensic audit is not going to help us moving forward. Investing millions of dollars in party building, lawyers, communications technology. I mean, the Democrats invested millions, and you see what they got. They got control of the state where they're really, they're not the majority. They're not even close, but they just out-organized the hell out of things. And the RPV went in the opposite direction. Okay, let's see. One Virginia new regulations legislation, but that's the redistricting. I don't know what's going on with One Virginia. I don't know that.
Can you hear me?
I can
Yes.
hear some. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. My name's Martha. It is legislation that Governor Northam signed into law about 3 weeks ago that codifies into all state agencies diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's hitting hard into the Department of Education, and it is the first state in the country to do so. It's considered leading the country on this neo-Marxism. They don't call it that, but that's what it is. And I'm finding that most candidates are unaware that it's happened, and it's something that we need to be running on.
Agreed. We have a program that we tongue-in-cheek named the Program on Un-American Activities. We are doing a lot of work on the critical race theory thing. I'm sure most people have heard of the situation in Loudoun County. I do expect that there will be both First Amendment and 14th Amendment challenges to all this critical race theory stuff, and I don't see how it survives it. The 14th Amendment is as explicit as it could be in terms of denying a apartheid ideology like critical race theory. That's another subject. We're on election integrity for tonight. Will it impact election integrity? I mean, just to the extent that this critical race theory stuff, really what it does on a practical basis is it drives out people who aren't part of the cult. They realize these people are crazy. Eventually, they don't want to deal with them. They leave, and that leaves whoever's left over in control of the situation, just the cult members. And you're kind of seeing that play out in Loudoun County, where this far left cult has seized control of the schools. And they will do that in all sorts of other places. We have heard word of registrars in Virginia being subject to this phenomenon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but HBL wants to know if candidates were able to view the risk limiting audit. Yeah, the risk limiting audit was all played out in public. It wasn't very convincing. And again, the risks that it limits aren't a good match for the risks that we're trying to limit in terms of what we've discovered are major deficiencies in the system. Okay. All right. That looks like we're wrapping up for the night. Last call for questions. If you got them, pop them in the chat. I believe you can take yourself off mute if you want to just speak. Going once. Going twice. All right.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. We're going to call an end. Thank you for attending. I hope you learned a lot. Hope this motivated you to take care of business and help get the job done, whether with us or locally. Again, this is the Virginia Election Integrity Audit Interim Summary Report, and we will have a final report coming out in a few months. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.